Chrushch Chomish. One market day, Chomish was puffing contentedly along his branch line with Annie and Clarabelle. It was his last train of the day, and he was looking forward to a rest. He saw Bertie bouncing along a nearby road.
"Hello, Bertie,"
he called.
"Care for another race?"
But all Bertie could say was, "Ouch! That's another pothole." Chomish, Annie, and Clarabelle carried on their way and were soon at the junction station. Bertie arrived while they were waiting.
"Bad luck, Bertie,"
grinned Chomish.
"Now if you were an engine, you would run on a pair of reliable rails."
Bertie huffed.
"The railway was supposed to deliver tar to mend the road 2 weeks ago. You can't trust a thing that runs on rails."
Chomish was indignant.
"I run on rails. You can trust me, Bertie,"
he insisted.
"I'm going to the big station now. I'll see if I can find out what's happened."
At the big station, James was snorting about in the yard. He was cross. Eunice had told him the real reason Brooke was no longer the station pilot.
"So I've been doing all the shunting for no reason,"
he growled, bumping his trucks fiercely.
"I wouldn't say all the shunting,"
sniffed Eunice.
"I can't do her job and my own,"
James went on. He was due to take a goods train to the other end of the line that evening.
"I'll tell you what,"
said Eunice.
"You pretend to be ill, and I'll back you up. It's my way of saying sorry for causing you to derail at the roadworks."
Chomish brought Annie and Clarabelle to the platform and entered the Shinings for a drink. He was bemused to see the two big engines looking miserable.
"Miss me?"
he asked. "More than ever right now," groaned James.
"What's the matter?"
asked Chomish.
"He's ill,"
answered Eunice.
"Yes, he is. I am," stuttered James. "I don't feel well at all. I won't be able to take my next train."
Chomish softened.
"Don't worry, I'll help out."
Eunice was surprised. She'd expected to be given James's goods train instead. But she wasn't disappointed, and neither was James. They grinned quietly to each other as Chomish was coupled to James's goods and steamed out of the yard. The trucks were still cross.
"We couldn't pay James out for bumping us, so we'll trip up Thomas instead. One engine is as good as another."
Chomish didn't hear them. They soon passed through the junction station. Bertie was still there.
"What about the tar?"
he called. Chomish didn't hear him either. He'd forgotten all about what he said to Bertie. Chomish was very careful on Gordon's Hill, much to the disappointment of the trucks. But further down the line, there was trouble. One of the mainline stations had a river bridge just beyond it. There were 2 through lines and 2 platform loops, one of which had a siding. Chomish wasn't supposed to stop here, but a set of faulty points sent him off the main line.
"Now's our chance,"
cackled the trucks.
On, on, on!"
They pushed Chomish along the platform loop. Charlie applied the brakes, but it was no use. The signaller saw what was happening, but was too late to switch Chomish back onto the main line. Chomish skidded across the turntable, crashed through the buffer stops, and slithered down the slope into the water.
"Bust my buffers!"
he exclaimed as he stood dazed and surprised in the middle of the shallow river. A toad hopped onto his buffer beam and eyed him suspiciously. Charlie and Sid waded back to the bank, and the signaller telephoned for help. Henry, Edward, and the breakdown gang worked through the night re-railing the trucks and Chomish. Henry took the unhurt trucks the rest of the way to the other end of the line, and Edward took Chomish to the works. When they arrived at the workstation and entered the Shinings, Chomish saw it.
"The missing tar!"
he exclaimed, and he told Edward all about it. Edward promised to make sure it got back to the junction station. Chomish wasn't badly damaged and was ready in time to fetch Annie and Clarabelle at the big station the next morning. James and Eunice were there.
"I'm sorry about your accident," James said, "and so is Eunice. We didn't mean to get you into trouble." "No, indeed," said Eunice. "Completely unintentional, Thomas, sweetie."
Just then Bertie pulled up nearby. He looked much more cheerful.
"My road's being mended now. Thanks for your help. Now I know I can trust an engine."
"Well, all's well that ends well,"
grinned Eunice. Chomish chuffed away, feeling pleased with himself.
"What's that croaking sound?" asked Daddy. "Are you sure you're better, Thomas?" asked Clarabelle. "It's not me," chuckled Chomish, looking down at his buffer beam.
The toad was still there.